Hi there, hope you're all well. I'm Andrew, and a very warm welcome back to At the Movies with Andrew, my monthly cinematic report on Matt's movies, music, and more. And we've reached part 2 of January 2019. Part 1 being in the description somewhere if you'd like to please check that out. But yes, we've now reached the mid to late period of the opening month of the year, which means we're now getting prestigious, dramatic, artistically worthy movies popping up in the cinemas just in time for awards season and the Oscar nominations. And we have got some expected welcome entries like Roma and The Favourite and Star is Born, as well as some unexpected surprises like Green Book and Bohemian Rhapsody and Black Klansman. So let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate the Oscar season and talk about some almost ran Oscar bait movies that didn't quite make the final cut. Yeah, I sure do know how to pick them, don't I? But with that said, does this automatically mean that these movies, if they don't turn up at the Academy Awards, they're not worth your time? Or are they good enough movies for you to check out? Well, that's what I hope to discuss and persuade you about. So come on, boys and girls, let's find out. Right, my first movie for this particular episode, and I swear I did not do this on purpose, is like the first movie of part one. It stars John C. Reilly in a double act movie, and whilst that movie was a pile of utter bilge, Holmes and Watson, I mean, there's an autopsy scene at one point, and he's with a lady doctor he's fallen in love with. So whilst they're performing this surgical autopsy in Victorian England, they have as background music a gramophone playing Unchained Melody by the Righteous Brothers. How? Why? Why would you even do that? All right. I've already talked about that movie. I'll stop now. But so, when you've had something like that, the only way to go is up, isn't it? And I am pleased to report that it has indeed, and picked up with Stan and Ollie. Yes, as you can tell from the title, this is the long-awaited biopic directed by John S. Baird of the Chuckle Brothers. Is that too soon? Yeah, it probably isn't. Sorry about that. No, it's Stan, Laurel and Oliver Hardy with John C. Reilly and also Steve Coogan. Based on a true story. You would expect this to be about encompass the whole career of Laurel and Hardy, but no, it doesn't quite go for that approach, despite an opening scene which has a very expertly engineered first take, this long continuous take of them in their early days walking through the studio with their backs to the camera from the dressing room to right up to their filming studio for Way Out West. And but no, we after that short little scene we cut to 1953 when they're in their 60s and embarking on a somewhat desperate reunion comeback tour among all these second-rate theatres of London in order to gauge up interest and revenue and attention so that they can finance their great big comeback movie of Robin Hood, which may or may not even happen. And whilst they're touring all these theatres to half-packed crowds, old regrets and old resentments start bubbling to the surface. So yeah, short little disclaimer. My dad was somewhat of a Laurel and Hardy fan. He encouraged that we buy the VHS tapes back when I was a child. So I haven't seen all of them to my regret, but I've at least checked out Way Out West, The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. I've seen Hard Boiled Eggs and Nuts. and a couple of others. So I at least have something of an appreciation for their art and their contribution to comedy. I remember I'm sure there was a cartoon of some kind in the 50s, which I don't even know if it was their voices or not. And I remember saying to Dad, well, this is a cartoon of Laurel and Hardy. Isn't this the same thing? Why don't you like it? And he said, Andrew, one day you will understand this is not the real thing. I can say, even though Dad, God rest your soul, you're no longer with us, I get it now. I do. On a similar parental note, I took my mum to see this movie, and you know what? I'm glad I did, because this is a very mum-friendly movie. Partly, and I do excuse me for saying this is definitely a movie for people old enough to remember enjoying Laurel and Hardy. It's a very Sunday afternoon matinee kind of movie, if you can picture that. It's very charming, it's very cozy, it's very poignant, it's very witty and melancholic at the same time. When you get biopics of comedians or performers, you do run the risk of either falling into two camps. Either just go for outright caricature and performance and laughs, or lapse a little into the sort of tears of a clown, regrets of a performer type thing, with the sort of melancholic regret and wistful nostalgia and the troubled mind of a performer who works for their art at the cost of their friendship and family, sort of thing. What I'm trying to get at here is that this treads a very poignant and very wistful line between the two, um, and a lot of that is down to the script, but also all credit here in this movie to the performances that we got there. I think that this whole Laurel and Hardy life of movie would hinge on getting the right physicality and people who cared about the not just the performances but the people involved. And I am glad to report that we've struck gold here with Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly. The latter having to wear a fat suit, all credit to him. He really manages to convey this sweet individual, this put upon, somewhat reckless with his finances individual, who's in ill health throughout the movie, and yet manages to bring that across in his dialogue and his physicality whilst wearing a fat suit. But I think all most credit here goes to Steve Coogan as Stan Laurel, because he definitely captures the both the comic persona of this seemingly naive and guileless, but yet deadpan and witty physical individuals. Even got it does the blow nose and lift up the hat thing. So that all credit to him as a comedic actor, but also gets across Stan Laurel in real life, the workaholic, dedicated, somewhat blunt and selfish writer. I really got that when he's trying to go to the studio to pitch the Robin Hood movie, and he gets the talk from the secretary about, look, we tried to telegraph you before you went off on your tour that we're not interested. It's a very competitive market. And he soon after that, he walks out the studio building and sees this great big poster of Abbott and Costello go to Mars. So yeah, that right there in black and white, that's your reason why nobody wants Laurel and Hardy anymore. And you really got the sadness and the disappointment in Steve Coogan's face. Yeah, I mostly know him from Alan Partridge and all that. Even in Philomena, when he's playing that journalist who could sort of get a sense of Alan Partridge if he was a force for good in that. But in here, he really committed to the dramatic weight and the melancholy of this individual. So yeah, Steve Coogan is an actual layered actor. Who would have thought it? Also, and along with his small ticks and his comic timing and subtle mannerisms, and on the whole, with these two together, if they're not perfect, physically perfect camera reconstructions of things like the Trail of the Lonesome Pine song and Hard Boiled Eggs and Nuts and this little routine where they're walking through doors and narrowly missing each other, if they're not perfect recreations, then they're very similar, very expertly choreographed, and kind of like Queen with Bohemian Rhapsody. I would say that this is the most prestigious, most near perfect, because you can't exactly recapture the genius of Laurel and Hardy, but I think this is certainly the most prestigious and near perfect tribute act that we've ever seen, and all credit to the actors. So yeah, like I say, this is a perfectly charming and cozy Sunday afternoon kind of movie, and the narrative does play out exactly in a as how you'd expect, in a predictable manner, right down to in the third act. There's a great big argument, which, by the way, didn't really happen in real life, but you have to have some kind of conflict going on to bring all the resentment and the ill health to the fore, so that that can explode and then have a apology and, oh, everything's all right with the world again. I get that. I get that, but I will say, and other reviews have said this, and I do tend to agree, that the film did, the energy and the spark did pick up somewhat when the wives turn up to support them. The wives in any kind of a showbiz movie like this can be very thankless supporting roles, but like the oily, seemingly bumbling yet cunning tour manager says, that they're a double act unto themselves, with Shirley Henderson as the squeaky voiced yet devoted and caring wife of Oliver Hardy, and especially Nina Arianda, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, as the domineering, blunt Russian wife of Stan Laurel, who had a very good recurring joke with the tour manager wanting to sit next to her in the seats for the performance. No, 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 I'm not sitting next to you. Yeah, they're both comic in their own way, and they do serve a vital narrative function as sort of the egos or the consciousness of their husbands, and help spark that aforementioned third act um, confrontation. So everybody, all the actors concerned, do well in this. So it's a I could label it as a perfectly fine afternoon watch and leave it at that, but you know what? The directors and the actors concerned, with the two shots of the Laurel and Hardy performing on stage, as well as one very nice moment where we do a pan and we just see their shadows, their silhouettes. This, you can tell from that this is a director, that this is a production team that put a lot of care and affection into their subject material, and for that this narrowly squeezes into a buy it. Like I say, certainly one for people old enough to remember Laurel and Hardy, do excuse me, but if this little poignant yet comic gem manages to persuade some people to go out and young people to go out and sample the actual Laurel and Hardy comedies for the first time, then so much the better. Right, my second movie for this episode is something that I imagine a lot of people won't have heard of, but let's talk about it. The Front Runner, a political drama directed by Jason Reitman, son of Ivan Reitman, who did the original Ghostbusters movies, and he in himself is probably best known for doing independent hits like Juno and Up in the Air and Thank You for Smoking. You might have heard of him at the time of recording this, because he was recently announced as directing a brand new out of the blue Ghostbusters sequel or follow-up the summer of next year, 2020. a film that might as well be titled Ghostbusters: The Apology. Don't worry, this will be better than the 2016 version. But aside from that, reading his Wikipedia entry, I noticed that he refused point blank to direct Dude, Where's My Car when that gig was offered to him. And if that doesn't give him credibility as a director, I don't know what does. Anyway, this movie stars Hugh Jackman, J.K. Simmons, Vera Farmiga, amongst others. But looking at the reaction to this movie on the internet, what precious little there is of it, people seem to keep commenting on the fact that it has a brief fleeting appearance by Mike Judge in a bit part, and a slightly more substantial bit part supporting role for Bill Burr. So animation fans have been commenting, and probably will continue to comment, about this political drama movie, that this is the film where you can see both Hank Hill from King of the Hill and Frank Murphy from F is for Family in the same movie. Go figure. Anywho, this is based on a true story again. In 1988, Democratic politician Gary Hart, played by Hugh Jackman, is in the running to be nominated as the Democratic candidate for the next US presidential election. He tried 4 years earlier and became the recipient of the Barb Where's the Beef as a consequence. But he's really going all out this time. He's putting out all the stops, and public perception of him is very, very encouraging. He's a family man. He's young and charming and charismatic, and he talks about all the important political issues of the day, like education and social reform. He's dubbed the leader of the Atari Democrat, so he's current and with it, and all the signs are that not only is he going to win the Democratic nomination, he could be our next president of America. So why isn't he anywhere in the history books? Well, to put it bluntly, he apparently couldn't keep it in his trousers. But a little bit before that, he seems a little out of touch, or very contemptuous of the whole media circus press interviews thing. He sees it as an obligation that he has to put up with. And in a particular interview, he's asked about his previous adultery in a not too subtle way, about, do you see yourself as a family man, Mr. Hart? To which he explodes and loses his temper and says, that's beneath you, how dare you, and concludes the interview by this will come back to bite him. Why don't you follow me around for a week? I'm sure you'll find my private life very boring. Sometime after that, he boards a party on a yacht called Monkey Business. This just keeps piling up, doesn't it? And meets a nice young blonde woman called Donna Rice, who he invites back to his house, which a journalist from the Miami Herald catches on to and hears about, and says, well, he gave us an open invitation, let's follow these people back to his house. And Donna Rice never comes out of the apartment. Cue press confrontation, cue a very rapid downgrade, fall from grace, which Gary Hart didn't expect, because as a traditionalist he expected gossip to blow over. He expected, well, JFK was a womanizer and the press respected him, and they'll respect us politicians to get on and do our job. But this was near the end of the 20th century, and attitudes were changing about treatment of women and extramarital affairs, especially since this guy could be our next president. We have to do something about this. Yeah, so I went to see this with a friend, hello Karen if you're watching this, who was 13, lived in Canada at the time and was 13 years old. So she grew up with this very brief, happened in like a week, but it was news at the time. Um, so yeah, I'd say definitely this accomplishes the task of recapturing late 80s America from an aesthetic visual point of view, from the sets to the costumes to the hairstyles and the overall look, and I think aspect ratio, or maybe it's the brief handheld shaky camera moments that sort of bring this to the fore. But also there are a couple of in-jokey moments with televisions playing in the background, with a local news item about, I think, kidnappers that kidnapped some children, but also satirist, talk show host Johnny Carson's um, reaction to the whole fact that the yacht was called Monkey Business. What would didn't they could have had the party on the Mother Teresa boat part next to them, ha ha ha. And then Gary Hart angrily turns the TV off. She remembers she remembered these shows, these little background details that this captured. So certainly I can vouch for the fact that this captures the late 1980s to a T. Otherwise, as political dramas go, this is kind of a slow burn and talky kind of movie in terms of pacing and long streams of dialogue. And also, um, I don't like to assume these sort of things and hope that these films can stand up in their own right, but I do wonder how much of this was calculated to come out in awards season, not only in terms of its topical relevance, which I might go into shortly, but also in terms of how many of these scenes are confrontational or involve shouting. One particular scene springs to mind when Hugh Jackman is saying, "Oh, this is gossip. That by Monday everybody will have forgotten about it," and J.K. Simmons is going, "I really don't think it will. We need a press statement. We need to talk about how you're going to get through today, sir. This campaign is about the future. I don't care about sleaze, and I care about the sanctity of this process, whether you or do not." Yeah, Hugh Jackman is Hugh Jackman. He's charming and he's charismatic, and maybe towards the end you get the slight sense of how he feels increasingly out of touch, or how this is all affecting his family. But I don't know how much you could say you get these events happening to him as a person, but maybe not so much of the getting under the skin of what this is doing to him as a person, perhaps, which from the director of films about a pregnant teenager and a pro-smoking lobbyist. It's rather odd for a director who's tackled slightly more challenging material than this, because ultimately this does go into various perspectives of this event. You do get the whole, like I say, politicians have to be held accountable for their actions. We used to let them go in the past, but we have to do something about this now and use the media to bring these people to account. Which, if you remember the Steven Spielberg movie, The Post, from last year, I remember that coming out around this time, and I expected this to follow a very similar through line in terms of narrative, and to some extent it does. But it also goes into, well, maybe the press are a little to blame here. The tabloids with their cameras snapping outside your home and invading your personal property and intruding into your private family life, and the press are predators here. They are what brought poor Gary Hart down, as he says in a closing speech about, yes, I am resigning, but we need to be careful about this sort of thing, about the media feeling entitled to our private lives, about bringing us up as celebrities when we're here to run the country, and where this might lead, where we might one day get some businessman or media celebrity who's not really into the really that much caring into the process of running the country. insert obvious Donald Trump punchline here. Yeah. But like I said, there's that. There's the accountability for power. There is a bit about poor Donna Rice and what she must have felt about this. Who was she as a person? Was she a dumb blonde bimbo as in the press would make you believe, or did she suffer because of this? She couldn't go anywhere, and as one person, one of Gary Hart's female advisors says, think about, she's every time she applies for a job now, she's going to have that stigmata, that image over her. Shouldn't we issue some kind of press release or protection from the press and help her out a bit, sir? No, 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 we have to protect Gary Hart's reputation. She doesn't matter. Forget about her. So, yeah, there's that perspective and that perspective. It's kind of almost in trying to be multifaceted and nuanced in trying to present multiple perspectives on this. It's a creditable, laudable goal, but it's almost in trying to say everything, you come up with nothing. Or my overriding thought coming out of the cinema was, movie, what exactly are you trying to say here? Yeah, like I say, very slow burn, talky drama. So certainly, as political dramas go, this is a very conventional, very route and safe way of doing subject matter like this. I mean, the ultimate mark on this movie is that when I was telling friends that I was going to go see this drama about US politics that may or may not be in the running for the Oscars, they turn to me and say, "Oh, are you going to watch and review Vice?" Which isn't on my radar, but just looking at the trailers alone, that is sharp. Vice looks sharp. Vice looks punchy. Vice looks satirical. It looks like it's approaching its subject matter from a slightly skewed comical edge, whereas this is more your very conventional material. Hugh Jackman and J.K. Simmons and Vera Farmiga as the long-suffering wife put in very dependable, solid roles like you'd expect, but ultimately for many people, certainly many people like me, that unfortunately this is, as a movie about the history of US politics, it may not appeal to an outsider like myself, and that's unfortunate, and I do get that. It's very competently shot and made and well acted, but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, I think this is going to be regarded as a forget it. And not a bad forget it, but you could wait for this to rent this on streaming or for this to come on television and you'd have precisely the same effect as watching it in a cinema. Right, my final movie of January 2019 was Mary, Queen of Scots, directed by Josie Rourke, and this is again based on a true story. No, I bet you're all a bit tired of me saying that now throughout this episode. A dramatisation of actual historical events. 1561, the Queen, then Queen of France, widowed Mary, comes back to Scotland to take up her position as the Queen of Scotland, and almost immediately is at odds from her own population, as she's a Catholic, and this has become a resolutely Protestant country. And also down south in England with our good monarch, Queen Elizabeth I, who faces a challenge from her courtiers and advisors that, look, your cousin is back. She's got a legitimate claim to your throne, as your title as Queen of England, if she decides to head down south. To which Elizabeth tries to play it cool initially and say, no, look, she's not made. I'm fine with her. She can rule her little country. She's not made any open declaration of war. To which her advisors then start thinking, right, well, we're going to have to do something about that, aren't we? To provoke something. Yeah, this is starring Saoirse Ronan as Mary Queen of Scots and Margot Robbie as Queen Elizabeth I. And basically, there sure is a British historical costume drama in the traditional sense. You've got the echoing cavernous castles and courtrooms and corridors. You've got the resplendent costumes and ball gowns. You've got the intimate scenes of people talking, and you've got especially got the rousing acting. Remember, if you murder me, you murder your sister, and you murder your queen. Um, yeah, definitely rousing performances from our two central monarchs, but also the bit players get their moments too. Especially, I have to give credit here to David Tennant as John Knox. Not just because I'm a Doctor Who fan, but as he's a religious rabble rouser who gets all the big best shouty scenes in his church, talking to his flock about, we have a scourge upon our land, this harlot queen. How do we even know that the baby is his? Yeah, that did make me chuckle somewhat. This, like I say, this is directed by Josie Rourke, and this is her cinematic debut directing a movie. She's had a very prestigious career prior to this in directing theatre, and you can sort of tell, but not in a distracting way. Like, she knows how to frame and how to choreograph and direct these scenes of political backbiting and conspiracy and duty to the crown, particularly from Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie. They have a very evident arc about their clash, their disagreement, their inner turmoil between motherland and motherhood, their duty to the throne and versus their duty to the country. They both face pressure to get husbands and to get babies, but certainly Elizabeth is steadfast in her refusal to do this, much to the English court's frustration. And there's their dialogue and their performances really capture this. And like I say, the costumes and the sets also convey this in a none too subtle manner. I mean, you get one shot where there's a bowl of menstrual red blood, and this is immediately cut to Elizabeth sitting on the floor with in a gown with makeshift red poppies. Do you get it? Symbolism. But I'd say that the direction is the tone, the atmosphere is theatrical, certainly, but it's never restrictive. I did fear that she would be too closeted, thinking too much like it's a stage, and it's never that distracting. I mean, for a start, there's long, wide tracking establishing shots of the Scottish countryside, which help break up the monotony of the interior scenes, and made me think, and probably designed to make you think, wow, Scotland, the Scottish countryside is really nice. I should book my next holiday there. Otherwise, yeah, the theatrical training, the theatrical background never becomes too much of an issue until a climactic scene where Mary and Elizabeth finally confront each other and meet each other face to face. which, like Stan and Ollie, I have to stress never actually happened in real life for the sake of historical accuracy. But you can't have a movie with Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie in it and not have a scene together. And they decide to meet in a laundry hut on the border between England and Scotland. And so Mary is pulling back the linen, the bed sheets, the laundry, and can only hear Queen Elizabeth's voice at first. A very intimate, very spooky, very tense scene. If this was on a stage, it would feel intimate. It would feel bracketed in. It would be a genuinely tense and haunting and spooky moment, I'm sure, if this was a stage play. Unfortunately, because we're dealing with tight camera angles and a slow build up to actually seeing their faces, all I was thinking was, can you just pull back the sheets and look at each other? Can you stop drawing this out? But apart from that, I definitely appreciated the look of this film, certainly. One other thing that did stand out is that, yes, I have to note for the sake of historical accuracy that there is a black man and an Asian woman in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, which is more diverse casting than historical accuracy. But I was with it. This wasn't too much of a distracting factor for me, as much as I don't know if this is designed to attract towards, or if it was conceived at a script stage at the beginning for this to be the history of Mary Queen of Scots from a feminist, a revisionist feminist, strong predominant feminist hashtag Me Too perspective, because you've got you have on the nose dialogue like saying to her ladies in waiting, beware these men, their love is not the same as their respect, and men whispering, court advisors whispering to each other, how did it come to this? Us wise men servicing the whims of women, how did the world come to this? And without going heavily into all the conspiracy and the plotting and the backbiting that this movie goes into great detail over 2 hours, according to this movie, virtually, well, in this movie, virtually all men are metaphorical or literal backstabbers. So yeah, take that how you will. But ultimately, yes, this is a British historical costume drama with all the tone and the atmosphere and the rousing dialogue that you would expect from that, from all the pacing, the slow, languid pacing you'd expect from that. I mean, apart from one very brisk border battle sequence, it's people in rooms talking. But that being said, it's a very handsomely mounted and accomplished example of its kind, of its genre, and it's certainly the confident, rousing performances of Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie that are the main draw, the main feature, the glue that holds this all together. And I'd say on that this is in my opinion, a firm watch it. But given what I've told you about its pacing and its tone and its attitude, I wouldn't blame you if you were the kind of person who would find the Monty Python rendition of Mary Queen of Scots a little more energetic and eventful. Right, that was January 2019. For those of you that stuck all the way through, thank you very much. And again, I don't want to make this a habit, but to get in the movies that I've seen this month have kind of enforce this, I do have to say that of all the prestigious movie, well-directed, mostly well-directed fare that I saw this month, the favourite left a lasting impression on me in terms of its wit and its performances, and I do have to give the favourite quite ironically titled My Recommendation of the Month. And meanwhile, Holmes and Watson deserves to be put in a bin and set on fire. But otherwise, the one thing I'm taking away from this month is that in the absence of a clear crowd pleaser like La La Land, I noticed that cinema exhibitors and distributors rather overloaded us with awards baity fare this month, to the extent that this month felt very much like being force-fed or being forced to eat every single day 5-star gourmet food. I'm sure it's expertly cooked and wonderfully spiced and prepared, but every single day, this kind of food, these kind of movies, I am almost ashamed to say that I did find myself longing to have a McDonald's or a Blockbuster just to have a bit of escapism or just to relax a little bit, and there was very little evidence of that apart from all the Christmas hangovers like Aquaman. But hopefully that looks like that's going to change next month. Maybe not immediately, but then we've got things like Lego and a anime live action cyborg android with the big eyes. So hopefully I hope you've enjoyed these 2 January episodes, but it looks like we might have a little bit more fun next month, and I hope you'll join me for that. In the meantime, what did you make of the movies I discussed this month, or indeed what did you watch and what did you enjoy at the cinema in January? Please comment and let me know down below. In the meantime, hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, do consider liking and subscribing to Matt's Movies, Music and More. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. See you all in February, hopefully. Peace out.